You say, well, why does God do that? Because we're too hard-headed. We don't listen. He says it's like an airplane. Say you're flying at 32,000 feet and you're just cruising along. Everything is fine. But all of a sudden there's engine failure and something sputters and you begin to take a nosedive towards terra firma. And you're pulling back on that wheel and you're praying, oh God, help me now. And this plane is going towards the earth. And just as you start to come towards the trees and it's just scraping the belly of your plane, you're just pulling back as hard as you can and the G-forces are pulling on you and you're holding back. God! You're yelling. Right then you become really open to God. Isn't that right? Now, the reason God pulls you down so close sometimes to death is because at that moment when you're on the gurney going in or you're at some physical breakdown or marital struggle or something is frying, your heart is really open to God. And you know what God does? He takes that opportune moment and He begins to deposit in you lifelong lessons that you are receptive to and you wouldn't have been before that. But you're in this state of being where He can now put into you, deposit into you lifelong lessons that'll stay with you the rest of your life. And you're open to, and you're willing to make whatever change is necessary. And then God begins to charge your engines again. You start to pull back up. And when you do, this is what God's going to say to you. Now, Wayne, I'm going to bring you back up to 32,000 feet. You'll be all right. But listen, when I get you up there, don't forget the lessons you learned when your belly was scraping the ground. Do you understand? That's why God has to do this. I can't take that away from you, and you don't want it to be taken away from you. I was going through a time where I thought I was having a heart attack. I went through every test there can be for my heart. I went through cardiac specialists, and we did all these different tests. And in fact, I was driving down the road, and my left arm started going numb. And I couldn't breathe. I couldn't clear my lungs. I called the doctor. I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And he said, well, does this happen? You're short of breath when you're sleeping? I said, no, just times like this. And he said, Wayne, you're having an anxiety attack. I said, for what? He said, I don't know. He said, but you're having an anxiety attack. And I knew I had to do something. So with this doctor, he said, I can put you on medication to let you down because you've got to get your serotonin level up and your adrenaline down. And sometimes if you just take that adrenaline away and you don't do anything, it's like coming off of heroin. You're going to go through some withdrawals. I said, I got to do it. I don't have the time, a year to do it. So he said, then you better get some rest. So here's my story. So you know what I did? I actually checked myself into a monastery. It's one of those no-talking monasteries. Honest. And I said, I'm just going to go for a week, and I need to get my life together. So I went, and these things, it's like no talking, no internet, no cell phone coverage, because it's way up in the boonies, and there's no coffee. Yeah, it was like hell. You think about that. It's like I go in to look for my cabin, it's up in the woods, and they don't even talk to you. They have a little thing here. Your cabin is, and you have to, okay, and the cool thing is, though, these monks, they have hoods and everything. The only time they use their voice, which is beautiful, is in the morning. They sing the Psalms at 5 a.m., and then at Vespers at 6:30 in the evening. That's it. So that's the only time they use their voices. The first day was novel. I could handle it. But the second day, my whole system began to shut down. And I tell you, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't breathe. My neck started to go out because my muscles began to tense up. I was in a fetal position. It was the worst day of my life. I remember writing in my journal, I've never had this amount of pain. And I struggled. The next day, I would fill 3 yellow pads of paper of the things that I needed to change in my life. The pain was so great. I said, God, whatever you need me to change. I needed to change the parameters, the set points. I needed to have new navigational beacons in my life, new principles, new price tags. I'm going to switch them all. And I knew God was reforming me. I was like Isaiah in Isaiah 6, Lord, woe is me, for I am undone. It was like God had dismantled me and took me apart. But I knew he was doing something. I knew he was up to something. It's sort of like, I took my motorcycle in because I wanted a little bit more juice in my engine. And so the first thing the mechanic did, great mechanic, was he dismantled my engine. Just completely undid it. And it looked so pitiful there on his workbench. I looked at my beautiful motorcycle. But then you know what he did? He bored out the cylinders. And he put in bigger, higher compression pistons in it. And when he put it back together, it looked basically the same. But the insides were completely different. And there was much more horsepower. And sometimes God's going to do that to you. You're going to feel undone. You're going to feel dismantled. And it can come at any state in your ministry. I was just with 22 of the top young leaders in Dallas, Texas. All guys under 40 years old now. And they all had churches over 3,000. We brought them together, and I was one of kind of like the veteran grandpas there to kind of give them some help and advice. And you know what? The same symptoms I went through, I was seeing and observing in these guys under 40. One guy was crying, and he said this, "I don't want my kids growing up hating God because of me." And I thought, man, it's starting quicker and quicker. Because, as wonderful as these conferences are, you're going to learn great ideas. You're going to get great principles. But it's like adding nitric oxide to your fuel. And I'm seeing these symptoms earlier and earlier. Will you avoid them? You're still going to go through them. God's going to dismantle you. But, I think God said, Wayne, I see what's coming up ahead, and I need you to have a little bit more horsepower. So he dismantled me during that time. And I just wrote that stuff out on these yellow pads of paper. All the things that I needed to change. And then I began to take a look at my own pride and how I had violated the Sabbath again and again and again because I thought I was invincible. And I made a covenant with God saying, Lord, as soon as I get out of here, I'm going to put these into practice. I'm going to put them into practice.